How would you react if you witnessed an adult woman push a 9-year-old disabled child into a swimming pool while uttering, "This area isn't for people like that"? That's what happened to my daughter Zoe. But Margot Blackwell did more than just push my disabled child into the pool. She also said that troubled children will lower our property values without knowing I'm the one who is responsible for enforcing anti-discrimination laws throughout the nation. What consequence do you think Margot deserved? Let me tell you how this story went down. My name is Taylor Rodriguez, and this is what happens when you cross the wrong family. The weather in Northern Virginia that summer was sweltering. That July afternoon, we had just relocated to Cypress Grove Estates 3 weeks before my promotion as enforcement director in the Civil Rights Division at the Department of Justice. The work entailed getting closer to Washington, D.C., and I had specifically selected our new neighborhood for its accessibility features and well-established aquatic center that was necessary for Zoe's physical therapy. "Daddy, do you think the pool will be busy?" Zoe asked as she tightly secured her leg braces. At 9 years old, she had already perfected the complex task of bracing herself into the custom orthotics that supported her lower legs. "Most probably," I said, helping her tighten the last strap. "It's opening day, but Dr. Chen is reassuring us that swimming is the best therapy for your muscles, so we're going anyway." Zoe nodded sincerely. She had been diagnosed with cerebral palsy as a toddler, which predominantly affected her mobility in her lower body. Years of therapy had greatly improved her condition, but she still used forearm crutches for balance and stability when she walked in water. However, she walked with a freedom that land denied her, which is why the community's Olympic-sized pool had been a deciding factor in our housing choice. "I finished my new playlist," she announced, waving her waterproof music player. "It's all Taylor Swift and Billie Eilish." I smiled at my daughter's careless taste. Despite the hardships she faced each day, Zoe possessed an irrepressible personality. Her dark hair outlined a face that smiled so readily and eyes so similar to her mother's before cancer took her from us 3 years ago, sparkled with intelligence and perseverance. "Joyful pool music," I concurred, bringing our towels, "ready for your great debut at Cypress Grove." She smiled, sitting up, using practiced ease. The journey to the community center was short but deliberate. Zoe wouldn't use her wheelchair in place of her crutches. Determined to build herself up, I paced myself to hers, glancing over our new neighborhood as we strolled. Cypress Grove Estates was everything the brochures had promised: spotless landscaping, Mediterranean architecture, and a sense of elite luxury. The house started at 7 figures with HOA dues to match. The new aquatic center stood at the center of the community, a glass and stone beacon housing both indoor and outdoor pools, a fitness center, and spa facilities. Today's grand opening had been billed as the social event of the season, with the HOA pulling out all the stops on catering, music, and celebration. As we pulled up, I could see residents in summer attire milling by the entrance, champagne flutes in hand. Some did turn to look as Zoe walked down the walkway with her crutches, their expressions ranging from polite smile to awkward ducking away to outright staring. I could sense the old protective reflex surfacing, but kept a neutral expression. Zoe had always told me she didn't want me lawyer mode on everyone who looked at her twice. Mr. Rodriguez, a friendly voice, wished us good morning. Rebecca Washington, our next-door neighbor, smiled and waved at the doorway. A retired civil rights attorney herself. Rebecca had welcomed us to the community with homemade empanadas and good inside tips about the community. "Rebecca, good to see you," I said as we arrived at her. "This is quite the celebration. Cypress Grove never does anything half," she had promised before smiling down at Zoe. "And you have to be the famous Zoe. Your dad talks about you all the time." Zoe smiled. "Did he say I'm going to be a Paralympic swimmer someday?" "He did, and I think so," Rebecca replied with actual warmth. "I was a competitive swimmer in college. Maybe I could give you some tips sometime?" "Yes, please." Zoe's excitement spilled over. As we chatted, I noticed a woman looking at us with keen interest, standing near the pool entrance. She was probably in her early 50s, tastefully dressed in a designer sundress with a name tag indicating she was on the HOA committee. Her well-lit blonde hair was pulled back in a stern bun, and her face suggested she had just caught a whiff of something rotten. Rebecca saw where I was looking and lowered her voice. "That's Margot Blackwell, chair of the Amenities Committee, an unofficial queen of Cypress Grove. Watch yourself. She acts as if the new aquatic center is her own kingdom." I nodded my thanks for the warning as we went into the building. The building was even more beautiful than the virtual tour had made me think. Sparkling blue waters, state-of-the-art equipment, and wall-to-wall windows with views of the beautifully landscaped grounds. Daddy Go Zoe nodded enthusiastically at the indoor therapy pool, which was equipped with a hydraulic lift and graduated entry ramp. May we swim in that one? After I swim some laps, definitely. I walked her towards the locker rooms, changed first. 20 minutes later, Zoe emerged in her favorite purple swimsuit and swim cap, moving cautiously on her crutches over the slightly damp tile. I accompanied our towels and her auxiliary mobility devices, having learned early on to anticipate everything. The outdoor Olympic pool was active but not overly crowded. I was able to find us 2 lounge chairs over at the less populated end and help Zoe get her things in order. Through her custom waterproof crutches would allow her to enter and exit the pool independently, a freedom she enjoyed. Remember what Dr. Chen said I reminded her while she was getting dressed to get into the pool. Start off in slow stretches in the shallow water before you do laps. I know, Dad, she said in cheerful exasperation of a child who'd heard 1,000 times before the same instruction: stretches first, then freestyle, then backstroke. I stood tall as she moved along the pool steps, walking hesitantly but definitely. Several kids nearby watched with interest, but none approached adults as a given, did the dance of practiced nonchalance, pretending to be indifferent, while standing in sharp awareness of her presence. Zoe had hardly reached the top of the pool when a sharp voice cut through the noise of the background. "Excuse me, those are not permitted in the pool area." Margot Blackwell strode our direction, designer footwear clicking authoritatively on pool deck. One finger that was well-groomed pointing directly at Zoe's crutches. I took a step forward. "They're waterproof mobility devices," I said calmingly. "They're actually made for water environments." Margot's compressed lips. "I don't care if they're made for anything. The rules clearly state no outside equipment in the pool." She indicated toward a sign outlining many things not permitted, like food glass containers and inflatable toys. "These aren't equipment," I disproved. "They're medical mobility devices that are exempt from those limitations under the Americans with Disabilities Act." Zoe froze at the pool's side, her enthusiasm dwindling as she became the center of unwanted attention. Chatter in the area fell to a whisper as individuals turned to see the altercation. "The ADA does not supersede our HOA health and safety regulations," Margot stated with absolute but misplaced confidence. "Those can damage the pool surface or harm other pool users. They're constructed from specialty non-marking materials exactly to prevent any such issues," I explained, working to maintain my professional attitude. "We have approval letters from Zoe's physical therapist for their use in the pool that we took down last week and received approval." Margot's look faltered briefly. Clearly, she hadn't been informed of this approval, but rather than backing down, she doubled down. That approval would have had to come through my committee, and I did not approve anything. She crossed her arms as amenities chair. "I have final say in what's allowed in our facilities." By this point, Zoe had begun to back away from the edge of the pool, her face flushing with shame as more of the residents gathered to view the spectacle. My heart ached seeing her joy evaporate, replaced by the self-consciousness she worked so hard to overcome. "Zoe," I called softly, "go ahead and get in the pool. Your crutches are approved, medical devices." She hesitated, looking uncertainly between me and Margot. "Young lady," Margot said, focusing her attention directly on Zoe, "this is a new multi-million-dollar facility. We can't have it ruined by incompetent equipment." Her voice turned condescending sweet. "Maybe your father could help you into the water without those. Or maybe the therapy pool would be more appropriate for your condition." The therapy pool indoors, isolated from the main social area, essentially severed from the normal swimmers, I could feel my professional facade begin to crumble. My daughter has an absolute right to swim in this pool with her necessary mobility aids. I invoked my voice using the tone I typically reserve for courtroom arguments. The Fair Housing Act and ADA both promise that right. Specifically, Margot's face went icy cold. "I'm trying to be reasonable here, but you're being difficult. The fact is, accommodations like these have to be reserved ahead of time. We can't have people taking medical equipment into public areas at random. It messes with the experience for regular residents." The phrase "regular residents" hung there like a clap of thunder. Some bystanders shifted uncomfortably. Rebecca Washington had appeared on my right-hand side, her phone unobtrusively held at an angle that suggested she was taping the exchange. "Margot," she broke in quietly, "I think you're overstepping here." "Keep your nose out of this, Rebecca." Margot flashed, "The Amenities Committee has full discretion concerning pool use policies." During this conversation, Zoe had continued with her conservative approach to the water, determined not to be diverted from her therapy session. She reached the top step of the pool entrance, her crutches placed in a position to assist her down into the water. Safely, Margot saw this and moved with surprising speed, considering she was wearing 4-inch heels. "I said they are not permitted," she declared, reaching for one of Zoe's crutches. What followed appeared to happen in slow motion as Margot reached for the crutch. Zoe automatically attempted to keep her balance, twisting away from unwanted movement on the wet pool deck, caught her off guard. Margot, still holding on to the crutch, managed successfully to shove Zoe off balance. With a small squeak of surprise, Zoe fell sideways into the pool, her crutches clattering across the deck. The splash splashed water over nearby loungers, causing gasps from spectators. I was in the water in an instant, my heart racing. Though Zoe was a strong swimmer, the surprise of an abrupt fall could daze anyone. I overtook her as she splashed water out of her eyes, coughing and pushing wet hair from her face. "Are you okay?" I asked, holding her upright in the water. She nodded, though her lower lip trembled. "I'm okay," she whispered, but the shake in her voice told a different story. The public humiliation was more than any physical discomfort. As I escorted Zoe to the edge of the pool, I could hear Margot's voice raised to Carrie. "This is the very reason why we need more rules. See what has happened when we let improper equipment get through. She might have been badly hurt." The temerity of her accusation of Zoe causing a fall, which Margot herself had initiated, made a wave of white-hot fury pass through me. I took a deep breath, knowing that losing my temper would be just doing harm to Zoe. I hoisted my daughter out of the pool and gently set her down in the adjacent chair, winding a towel around her shoulders. Her eyes were downcast, evading the stares of other residents. "It's not your fault," I said softly. "Not one bit," and turned to face Margot, who stood beside Zoe's crutches in each hand, holding them away from her body as if they were contaminated. "Give me my daughter's medical equipment," I demanded, my voice flat, but with an unmistakable sharp edge. Margot refused to give in. "These will need to be thoroughly sanitized before they go back on the pool deck. If at all they are even permitted, I will need to get this cleared through the board." A buzz of objections began. Now, not all inhabitants of Cypress Grove were content to silently endure such treatment. "That's enough, Margot." An older gentleman from a nearby table, "Give the girl back your crutches." "This is none of your concern," Harold Margot replied curtly. "As paying members of this organization, we all have a stake in maintaining certain standards. Special accommodations of this sort need to be made in private, not imposed on community spaces. It affects everyone's property prices when we start to resemble some kind of rehab facility." A collective gasp followed this statement. Even the ones who have privately harbored the same thought commends the inhumanness of voicing it. "So out in the open," Rebecca proceeded, phone still recording. "I believe I have everything that I need," she said quietly. "Taylor, would you like me to send this recording?" "Yes, please," I replied. Still, we're concerned with rescuing Zoe's mobility aids. Margot narrowed her eyes as she logged the phone. "Taping without permission violates HOA regulation," she asserted. "Erase that instantly." In reality, Rebecca responded assertively. "The swimming area is one of public zones in the subdivision, and there should be no claim of privacy, but I am happy to present this as proof before the board, with respect to your actions today." A fleeting flash of doubt fell across Margot's countenance, but she regrouped brusquely. "This family is in breach of explicitly posted regulations. I was simply enforcing them, as is my duty. If anyone is to be reported to the board, it's them." I approached Margot. My training as a professional kicking in, I knew exactly how to handle individuals who believe their power. "Absolute, Ms. Blackwell." I stated, my voice now possessing the exact measured tone employed in legal proceedings. "You have physically attacked a disabled child, denied access to medically necessary mobility aids, and made discriminatory comments regarding disabilities and accommodation, all of which is a violation of federal civil rights law. I am respectfully requesting that property belonging to my daughter be returned and will be taking this action through proper procedure. Something in my behavior must have finally broken Margot's sense of self-righteousness. She shoved the crutches at me with a puff. "This isn't finished," she blustered. "The board will hear about this rudeness, I guarantee it," I told her calmly. As Margot walked away, a few residents approached to apologize. "That was awful," said a woman who said her name was Helen. "My grandson has hearing aids and I couldn't believe someone acting that way. Margot's worse now that they relocated her amenities chair to another patient. Power trip hardly covers it." I thanked them for their sympathies but asked Zoe, who remained quietly wrapped up in her towel, "Do you want to stay or we go home?" She balanced the question with gravity that always tended to surprise folks who wouldn't listen to her seriously. "If we leave now, she wins." Zoe lastly responded, "I still need to do my therapy exercises." Pride swelled in my chest at my daughter's resolve. "Then let's do your exercises. Different pool, though." We moved to the indoor therapy pool, which was mercifully vacant. As Zoe began her stretches in the water, I sent off a quick email to my office requesting certain public records searches. Then I called Dr. James Chenso's physical therapist, James. "We had an incident at the pool today. I made it clear what had occurred. Would you be available for an HOA meeting sometime later this week? I think your medical expertise might come in handy." "Yes," he replied immediately. "I'll bring every one of Zoe's records and studies on the advantages of aquatic therapy. Just let me know when and where, Yen." By the time we departed the aquatic center, Rebecca had already forwarded me the video of the entire encounter, along with contact information for 3 other witnesses who are willing to provide statements. Let us know where you're watching today. And if you're new here, don't forget to like this video and subscribe to join our growing community. The emergency meeting of the HOA had been scheduled for Thursday evening, just 3 days after the accident. The stated business for the evening included consideration of pool use policy and safety regulations, but the community grapevine had gotten the word out. The meeting room at the clubhouse was packed. Zoe had asked to attend, insisting that she wanted to see the outcome up close. "It's my fight too, Dad." She'd spoke so authoritatively that I couldn't refuse. Dr. Chen met us outside looking professional in a clean suit and with a folder of papers bulging. Dr. Chen had Rebecca join us soon after that 2 staff people from the Justice Department's Civil Rights Division who had offered to accompany us in support off the record. As expected, inside board members sat at a long table facing the room. Margot sat down slightly off to the side, standing in for the Committee of Amenities, but not the board itself. She visibly paid when she spotted Dr. Chen and my co-workers, with a definite knowledge that this would not be the simple disciplinary hearing that she had had in mind. The board president, Thomas Hargrove, opened the meeting at 7 p.m. on the dot. "Good evening, everybody." He began surveying the unexpectedly full room. "We've called this emergency session to discuss issues raised concerning our new policies for the aquatic center, especially those pertaining to accessibility equipment and accommodation." Margot quickly raised her hand. "If I may, President Hargrove, I've prepared a presentation regarding the safety policies we ought to implement for specialized equipment, such as segregated swimming hours for the therapeutic use." My jaw clamped with audacity after having physically shoved my child into the pool. She was pushing for segregated swimming hours. Thomas nodded. "We'll get to your recommendations, Margot. But first we have received a formal complaint about something that occurred on Monday, which I believe must be addressed." He turned to me. "Mr. Rodriguez has requested time to speak." "The floor is yours, sir." I smiled. I stood. "Thank you, Thomas. Good evening. To those I haven't met yet, I'm Taylor Rodriguez. My daughter Zoe and I have just moved to Cypress Grove." I nodded towards where Zoe sat happily beside Dr. Chen. "I'd like to discuss what happened at the opening of the pool on Monday afternoon and raise some key legal issues arising from that event." Margot interrupted. "If you're talking about the rule enforcement issue, I was just..." Mrs. Blackwell Thomas jumped in sharply. "Mr. Rodriguez has the floor. Please wait your comments." I thanked him and proceeded. "On Monday, my daughter was physically pushed into the pool by Mrs. Blackwell while attempting to utilize her medically necessary mobility aids, specialized waterproof crutches specifically made for aquatic environments. Prior to that, she had been told that her presence as a disabled individual would lower property values and she should utilize segregated facilities rather than the main pool. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Margot sat up straighter, indignation in her demeanor. These actions and comments are clear violations of several federal statutes, I continued. What Mrs. Blackwell may not have realized when she decided to discriminate against my daughter is that I am the enforcement director for the Civil Rights Division of the United States Department of Justice. The room went utterly silent. Margot's face went white. In my official capacity, I explained, I am in charge of enforcing the Americans with Disabilities Act, the Fair Housing Act, and other civil rights laws nationwide. I spend my days investigating and prosecuting precisely this type of discrimination. I reached into my briefcase and retrieved a folder. I've written a brief outlining the specific violations that occurred on Monday, including physical assault of a disabled child, denial of reasonable accommodation, discriminatory remarks and attempted facilities, segregation based on disability. I copied for all members of the board before leaving. With your permission, I would like to now act it out to the community because I believe that transparency is needed in attempting to correct discrimination. Thomas looked over at the other members of his board who nodded agreement. Went on, he said, the film was shown on the big screen at the front of the room. The footage was clearer than I recall having recorded it. Margot's scornful voice, her insistence on Zoe occupying facilities separately, her comment about standard residence and house prices, and finally the physical struggle that had thrown Zoe into the water. When it was over, the room remained silent for a few heartbeats before breaking out in indignant dialogue. Thomas needed to rap his gavel multiple times to reestablish order. Furthermore, I continued once quiet had been regained. Dr. James Chenzo's physical therapist is here to deal with any medical inquiries about her mobility aids and the therapeutic need for swimming for her condition. Dr. Chen stood there introducing himself and his qualifications before detailing the high-tech nature of Zoe's equipment and how aquatic therapy was a crucial component of her treatment plan. These devices pose no risk to pool equipment or other individuals in the water, he concluded. In fact, they are used in professional aquatic facilities around the globe exactly because they are designed specifically for such settings. Throughout these presentations, Margot sat rigid as a board in her chair, her face alternating between determination and breaking down realization of the severity of her actions. When Dr. Chen had spoken, Thomas turned to her. Mrs. Blackwell, would you like to respond to these accusations? Margot stood smoothing her skirt with trembling hands. I was simply enforcing our community pool safety guidelines. Perhaps I was a bit too forceful in my manner, but my intention was to safeguard our buildings and inhabitants. Your intentions are not covered by the law. I interrupted peacefully. Your actions are textbook discrimination, no matter what had caused them. I hadn't realized she was sick. Margot complained. How was I supposed to have realized those were medical equipment and not just some kind of device you were informed in? So many words, Rebecca called from her seat. It's on the video. Taylor explained they were medically necessary mobility aids, and you dismissed that explanation. Secondly, I added the HOA office had already approved Zoe's use of these machines. You overruled that approval on grounds of your own discomfort with her disability. Margot looked wildly at the board. This is being blown out of proportion. I admit I may have done this in a better way, diplomatically, but you pushed a child into a pool, came a voice from the back of the room, a disabled child. There's no diplomacy concerned in doing that. Other voices were added to the outrage brewing in the community. Thomas was forced to use his gavel again to quiet. What exactly are you searching for here, Mr. Rodriguez? He asked when silence had resumed. I think we all agree the matter was adequately mishandled. I appreciated his candor. I am searching for three things. First, unilateral revamping of HOA regulations to explicitly guarantee compliance with the ADA and FHA, including reasonable disability accommodations. Second, removal of Mrs. Blackwell from the Amenities Committee because of her documented discrimination and risky enforcement practices. And third, a community commitment to accessibility training for all HOA committee members. But I hesitated before adding, what I'm not seeking is federal E&F. aerial enforcement action, or personal litigation. Though both would be well supported by the evidence, I'd prefer to resolve this on the community level, assuming that correct remedial action is taken. The threat was hinted at, but quantified. I wasn't trying to destroy the HOA or Margot in person, but I would utilize the entire force of federal law if necessary. Thomas conferred for a moment with the remainder of the board before addressing the room again. The board would like to recommend the following actions. First, we will act at once, create a task force to examine and revise all HOA policies for compliance with federal accessibility legislation. Second, we will be accepting Mrs. Blackwell's resignation from the Amenities Committee effective immediately. He glared pointedly at Margot. She seemed to be holding back tears. And third, we will be mandating training for all committee members regarding disability rights and accommodations. He turned to me. Would these actions speak to your issues? Mr. Rodriguez, they would. I promised I'd also have the board issue a formal apology to my daughter. Thomas nodded immediately. Naturally, on behalf of the entire Cypress Grove Estates Homeowners Association, I apologize to Zoe for how she was treated. It was unacceptable and does not reflect the community we strive to be. He then addressed Margot, Mrs. Blackwell. Do you have anything to say? All eyes were fixed on Margot, whose immaculate facade had given way entirely. She looked around the room as if seeing for the first time the general disapproval of her neighbors. She began, voice shaking. I was wrong. My behavior was unforgivable. She spoke to Zoe, who sat watching the scene with incredible calm for a 9-year-old Zoe. I am truly sorry for the way I treated you. There is no excuse for my actions. The apology seemed sincere if forced by circumstances. Zoe, showing more grace than anyone might have expected, nodded her acceptance. The meeting ended with a vote on the suggested actions, which was passed unanimously. As residents started to disperse, many came up to Zoe and me with words of support and welcome. Margot slipped away quietly through a side door, her social standing and reputation in the community irrevocably damaged. Rebecca joined us as we were getting ready to leave. Justice served, she said smugly. Though I must admit I'm a bit bummed we won't get to see the full fury of the DOJ come down on our little HOA. I smiled. Justice isn't always punishment. Sometimes it's about learning and change, diplomatic as usual. She replied with a winking smile. But between you and me, you had quite the federal case in the works, didn't you? Let's just say that my colleagues were very interested in this particular pattern of discrimination, I admitted. But I said what I meant. I'd rather see the community improve than annihilate it. Walking home in the soft evening light, Zoe was strangely silent, piecing together the events of the meeting. What are you thinking? I asked her finally. Her thoughtful face for a moment. I'm thinking of Margot. This caught me off guard. What about her? She looked totally sad at the end, said Zoe. Not because she got in trouble, but like she realized at last what she did wrong. Leave it to my daughter to find pity even for someone who had wronged her. That's quite perceptive. I had to explain to her. Sometimes people do the wrong thing because they have no idea what their actions are going to do. Do you think she'll get it? Zoe asked. I hope so. I said honestly. That's why we quarreled like this instead of just punishing her. Zoe nodded solemnly. Dad, may I ask for something? Anything when they set up that task force for rules change, can I be on it? Her eyes sparkled with determination. I want to help make a better place for other children like me. My throat contracted with pride. I think that's a fabulous idea. We'll bring it forward at the next meeting. 2 weeks later, the newly formed Accessibility and Inclusion Committee, its first session with Zoe as its youngest member. The aging therapy pool was renamed the Adaptive Aquatic Center, and equipped with other adaptive features, Margot Blackwell began volunteering at a disability center in her neighborhood as part of her own atonement. And on warm summer evenings, you can spot Zoe at the community pool, moving through the water with determined grace, her specialized crutches in waiting at the side of the pool. A visible reminder that Cypress Grove Estates belongs to everyone who calls it home. Sometimes justice shows up in courtroom battles and federal investigations, but sometimes it shows up in community awareness and a 9-year-old girl with enough backbone to stand her ground. As for Margot, last I heard, she's an unlikely advocate of accessibility in real estate development. Sometimes the most compelling teachers are our deepest failures.